Hello everyone, my name is Brian Wong. I'm founder of Radii, and today we are in conversation with the legendary Peter Shao. Peter, as many of you may know, is the founder and CEO of Immortal Studios. He is also someone who's dedicated his life to the mission of bridging the East and West through a number of initiatives as an entrepreneur, as a producer of films and other multimedia sort of content, as a financier, and he's even worked in the public sector as a senatorial aide and as a social activist. Today we're going to talk to Peter about his life, the motivations that have inspired him to do the things he's done in the past, but also learn more about his latest venture, Immortal Studios. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Brian. Good to be with you, man.
You and I go back a long ways, almost 2 decades actually. And I want to just use this first question as an opportunity for you to introduce to the audience your background. Tell us more about yourself, where you grew up, something about your family, and then what really motivated you to devote so much of your life to bridging the East and West.
Okay, well, I was born in Taiwan, so the first 9 years of my life was spent in a very traditional Chinese family. Because my father is a wuxia martial arts fantasy writer, you could say that I was born in ancient China somewhere. So that was my influence. It was Confucian, it was Taoist. Modernity barely registered. So my first memories was reading like the classic martial arts novels, Journey to the West. So I kind of grew up in ancient China in a modern world. I loved Taiwan as a 9-year-old, and I went to South Africa. And from Swaziland in South Africa, I got dropped into the urban jungle of Hollywood, where I became a Hollywood kid. So kind of had this dual life as a kid who loved to skateboard, who loved music, new wave, and everything related to the 80s. But my inner life and my family life was still stuck in ancient China, and my dad never left ancient China. So it was this balancing act of making both of them make sense. And I wanted to make them together, and I think that really informed my career decisions. And my career decisions have never been about dollars and cents. It's really always about something personal and meaningful. So the big thesis is, can they become one? And my answer was, I'm going to try. I think it also starts with wuxia. That was kind of the lessons my father taught me. He really inspired me to make my life about public service. I remember in our earliest memories, he says, son, I don't care if you make a lot of money. I don't care if you're famous or none of those things, but just do something meaningful for the world. Make a contribution and make a contribution to as many people, to the biggest masses you can find. So I think for a young person, that was really inspiring. The natural place for me to really think about was public service. So I committed myself to public service. And in fact, I built my career around running for political office. Like if you met me in my 20s, I think we have a little bit of this in common. My life was geared toward being in Congress before I was 30 years old. So I came pretty close to actually meeting that. I had a number of fantastic political mentors who really showed me how it worked, from Mayor Tom Bradley of Los Angeles to Senator Art Torres, who eventually became the chairman of the California Democratic Party and the Latino force. But when it came time for me to run for office, I had this big awakening. It was happening for some time that, number one, I was tired of wearing suits. I don't think I got out of a suit for like 7 years, and for so many years in a row. And two was that, I kind of made it in politics. I got bills passed. I was involved in legislation. And the more I got into it, the more I felt powerless. And it really wasn't about modifying external behavior. It was really about a deeper internal change. I wanted to be involved at the inception of change. And I wanted to do something that was meaningful for people who look like me. And I wanted to be involved in shaping perceptions and feelings and emotions, which predates any kind of meaningful social change. So when that happened, I was like, well, the mass medium to be in is entertainment, is global entertainment, it's film. So without ever having done anything in the entertainment world, I just jumped in. And quickly I was able to sell my first script, which just came out of nowhere. I was like, okay, maybe a little bit of my dad rubbed off on me.
So, Peter, you've mentioned your father quite a bit in this conversation and the great influence he's had on you and how he writes about this genre of wuxia. A lot of our viewers may or may not know what this term means. So I'm wondering if you can really help us define the concept. I've read in some places wuxia refers to chivalry, fighting for the disenfranchised. But there are actually two elements in this term, two words. One is wu and one is xia.
Well, first of all, you've already said wuxia literally means the martial hero. And in this context, wuxia is actually a literary tradition. It's a culture that is as old as China is old. There is a very profound martial arts tradition in China that is really about extraordinary personal transformation. The creators of Wudang, the creators of Taiji Chuan, Bodhidharma, who kind of co-created the whole Shaolin practice. So there's a lot of stories about superhumans through cultivation and through work. So this is one body of knowledge and understanding. It's a real authentic lineage. And then the other part of it is really lawlessness and people being taken advantage of. These stories of these extraordinary superhumans took an interest in the affairs of the common man and struck out and championed their rights. They created a whole new legends and stories, and these stories over time became more legendary. And as more people stepped out, it became a body of work and understanding, became a tradition. And this literary tradition has been unbroken for the past several thousand years. And he was part of this flow in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that was kind of what I call the wuxia 2.0. The modern era was born, and my father was one of the stalwarts. When this kind of movies made it to the US, they inspired a whole new street culture, and then Bruce Lee came and took it global. So it's a confluence of these things, and this is how this body of work as wuxia has transpired over the years. So our goal is to take the authentic message of wuxia, which is awakening the inner heroes in everybody. There's a lot of problems in the world that I think calls for all of us to step out and to be heroes. And so it's a very appropriate time. There's a Chinese saying, 时势造英雄. The circumstances create the heroes. So I feel like this is an era that is calling it out to. And we're stepping into this moment where I think Chinese faces are marginalized, are misrepresented, misunderstood. This tradition that comes from China has really a beautiful message. Our goal is to create a storyverse that's interconnected, that includes every conceivable influence that's fallen under from wuxia, from grounded street fights to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to Mortal Swordsman, all the way to the Buddhas and the Monkey King. So creating an interconnected world. Yeah. So it's actually a really, really big goal. We're creating our own lane. We're creating a studio that is really devoted to this genre. People who've seen our plans and say, oh, you're kind of creating like a Marvel. Well, that's kind of, I think, a relevant comparison.
Tell us what that means, Storyverse, because I had to actually do a little research on what this concept is.
We actually coined the word. At any given time, because culture is a fast shifting kind of conversation, and I think people realize that the most successful entertainment companies today are brands. They stand for something. They speak to a demographic. Right now, there isn't a place where you could actually experience wuxia, and we're not just one story, two stories, but a confluence of stories. Thousands of characters interacting with each other with multiple mediums: films, television, games, interactive, comic books, live experiences, because I think those are the things that consumers expect. And to do it in a very methodical, intentional, and planned way. Yeah. So it's about birthing a universe where this kind of knowledge and understanding of characters are very much live and well. And that's diverse enough to include every influence that falls under it. That's why we call it a storyverse, because it's a universe of stories.
And so all theoretically, these 55 novels that have inspired stories that you're telling should actually have an interrelationship between.
Yes.
Right?
So that's kind of the work that I'm doing in my office right now. The books behind me, half that wall are from my father. So it's it's really kind of an emotional experience. You know, he's not here with me to share it, but I'm reading, I'm interconnecting. I've also created my own titles. It's like joint venturing with my father and really becoming one in the process.
So Peter, I want to focus a little bit on your father a bit more. I understand he's quite different from other contemporaries like Louis Cha, who was also a very famous wuxia novelist. But Louis focused more on the the fighting side, whereas your father focused more on the xia, more the compassion and kind of the self cultivation side.
Well, it's because I know him as my father. You know, the guy you see hanging around the house all day. It wasn't really until so you know, my dad was actually just a unique creation of his kind, and he studied a lot about Chinese culture. So he understood a lot of the knowledge, and one thing that he really wrote to is that he wrote authentically about the culture, especially about the esoteric culture in a way that is believable and accessible. And I think that really makes him different.
Yeah.
And through his work, you also see 3 chapters of his life. When he was just younger, he was a pulp writer. My grandfather before him was a war general. He was one of the 5 Chiang Kai-shek's 5 Tiger generals who fought, you know, the most difficult campaigns. He came from a military family, thinking that he would be an engineer, but he wrote a short story. He sent it to a newspaper, and next week they loved it. They published it. The next year, he had a movie deal with Golden Harvest. So he just kind of stepped up into it.
Oh, that's
So when you read his book, literally, you see him grow from a young man who just had a vivid imagination and a way with words into his middle years, where he really dove deep into human psychology and culture. And then in his later years, he really became transcendent. The search for the xia, the meaning for the xia, became very, very central.
Yeah.
So the evolution of the martial also became more evolved. We always had this conversation because I always believe that when you look in wuxia, it's not about the fighting and it's not about the killing. It's not about those action elements. It's really about an evolution of the human will and human consciousness and where it can go. The universe kind of picks up where he left off. And part of that involves going back to the founding ideals of transformative martial arts and the philosophies itself. So I think this is really the holy grail of it.
In your experience doing film, you probably encountered a similar issue. You produced a number of films in the US, but also in China in co-productions. We've seen a number of these attempts in the past that didn't end so well. Now with Immortal Studios, it sounds like it's a similar endeavor. Tell us a little bit about the film experience, why you think these things don't always work out, and then how you plan to address that with Immortal Studios.
Well, first of all, film is an amalgamation of a lot of people working together. And because it's storytelling, there's a very creative part of it. And it's inherently risky. So there's an inherent risk element to any kind of film endeavor. Just telling a good story is not an easy thing to do. You superimpose upon that different cultures, different expectations. It's a very, very complex process. Yeah. So I don't think we celebrate the great accomplishments that have already taken place. For instance, you know, a movie called The Meg in 2018 during this big downturn, when things were starting to turn, you know, was a legitimate US co-production at the highest levels. And this is a movie that grossed over $500 million. People don't talk about that. People remember the Great Wall experience. So first of all, there has been wins, there have been successes. And frankly, had it not been the turn of the policy and political environment, I think a lot of those efforts will continue. And there's a reason why I'm leaning into wuxia, because frankly, wuxia is just one of those things about Chinese culture that already has a global fandom. From a very practical point of view, by dealing in a genre that already has a lot of great acceptance, wuxia is just one of those things that truly has already transcended cultures.
Hey, Peter, just thinking about that, do you have any examples off the top of your head where mainstream American culture has really embraced this concept of wuxia? I mean, obviously I'm thinking Wu-Tang Clan, for example.
Yeah, let's look at The Matrix, for instance.
Yeah, okay.
It's a wuxia film, hands down. Talk to the Wachowskis, they'll tell you it's a wuxia film. From the hero's journey to the application of the martial arts to the big bad villain, it's actually a classic wuxia film down to, and think about it, Yuen Wu Ping choreographed the whole thing. So I would say The Matrix is a wuxia film. You look at Kill Bill, you look at Quentin Tarantino, you look at Star Wars. So I would say that wuxia has had a profound influence on global pop culture. It's just been genre-ly appropriated. From the action language of cinema, right after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon came out around the year 2000, just think about it. The action movies out of Hollywood, post Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and pre are very, very different. I would say that everything that has come after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon has an element of wuxia built into it. You know, there are a lot of people who want authenticity, who believe in representation, who want to go deeper. So there is this moment to really step into it now that Marvel has kind of exited the global stage with their first run of the cinematic universe. You're about to go to the same old things. So the question is like, what are the ideas that are going to influence the next chapter of global entertainment and pop culture? And I would legitimately say that the era of wuxia has arrived.
I want you to tell us a little bit about these key tenets of Immortal Studios. I'm sort of fascinated by what you have listed down here.
Yeah, because I think when you're talking about wuxia, first of all, it's very easy to think about it as, oh, it's stuff that happened in the past. And I think in the process of doing that, like you're almost saying like those fantastic elements no longer exist in our world today, which I think is a very sad thing. So first of all, we're modernizing wuxia by having a contemporary backdrop. We're only focused on wuxia, so you're not going to see us do like a romantic comedy, a thriller, this or that. So we're singularly focused on excavating every element of the genre. There are no radioactive spiders.
I know that was going to be my next point.
So look, the whole DC, this whole Marvel thing is like, it's always like some lackadaisical person running along and this thing, the spider bites you, or a radioactive, you know, trash garbage can was thrown on your head, and now all of a sudden you become a mutant. It's almost like accidental, or you could be very wealthy and you can pay for this kind of technology, and then through machines you get it. But our universe is really centered around the work you put in. So it's the ultimate in democratic values, is that it works if you work it. So we develop our superheroes by harnessing the powers of our mind, body, and spirit.
And you have a term, everyone is the one in our world.
Yeah. I think because we're in the business of awakening heroes, ultimately, this body of work, this stories, is about inspiring people to become the heroes they want to be. I think through a lot of movies, they're always focused on the one. There's one person that's going to come and save it for everybody else. I think our understanding is different, is that we all occupy such an important part of our own lives. Heroes come in so many different colors, genders, sizes, and shapes. Everyone is the one is one of the founding principles that everybody is unique, beautiful, and powerful. And if they only believed it and act accordingly, the world will be a better place.
Thank you everyone for joining Radii in Conversation With, where we speak to experts who have dedicated their careers to bridging the East and West. So subscribe to our YouTube and hit the notification bell to be alerted for next month's guest.